Okay, now we are live.
All right, fantastic. Okay, everyone. Well, we will go ahead and get started. This is the December 1st meeting of the Deferred Compensation Board. And we have the first thing to do on our agenda here is to go ahead and accept the minutes from the September 15th, 2021 meeting. And those should have been sent out to y'all. And I'll entertain a motion to accept or deny those minutes.
So moved.
Okay. Got a motion from Dennis. Is there a second?
I'll second with a correction to the meeting times in there that I had sent Laura.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dennis, are you okay with those corrections being included? All right, fantastic. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we got minutes. Okay, fantastic. And everyone should had the agenda sent out that Laura sent out last night. And the next item we have on here is an update on the investment policy statement development. Laura, do we have any update there?
Yes, so we're ready to fully engage Aon. They're sitting on ready. And David Boyd had a couple of changes to the SOW, which we can certainly incorporate before it is signed by the mayor. And my concern as an administrator is that how we are actually authorizing this SOW. It's at a cost of approximately $20,000. And some years HR could certainly absorb that in our budget. We didn't anticipate this in our budget this fiscal year, but so we could probably find the funds, and we could certainly do a contingency request for 15,000 and then find the other 5,000 in our budget. But before I have the mayor sign this SOW, it's going to piggyback on our existing contract with Aon. And so I don't see a problem with our purchasing ordinance, but I just wanted assurance, I guess, maybe from the board that we do have support, that we bear this burden as a board if we can't find the money in the HR FY 22 budget.
And the alternative would be from where, Laura?
Well,
We'll
not to go forward with this yet, not to go forward with this until after the beginning of the next fiscal year, where we expressly ask for the 20,000 in HR's budget.
Well, okay. Well, as far as what the procurement thresholds are and the processes are, those are already in place. And so if you're asking for some board support for something, but it's not the board's responsibility to work that out as a manager working with staff.
Right.
So maybe I don't understand the question.
Well, I'm gonna, engage Aon to do this work. And I haven't identified the funding source yet. With a pension board task like this, it would come from the proceeds of our investments. And so it is not a hit to the general fund. With this, it would be general fund dollars.
Well, we can probably spread the cost among all funds that have personnel. So all funds that have personnel generally have an other general administration department.
Mm-hmm.
And there's usually funds there that can be used. So I think there's money there. It's just spreading it to all funds.
It's a little bit of an awkward administrative position.
So Laura, you're just basically asking to make sure that the board understands the cost and what is being asked here, and that we support this moving forward financially. Okay.
Administratively, we can certainly absorb the cost in the Athens-Clarke County budget somewhere, somehow. It's just I in seeking signature, mayoral signature of this SOW, don't have a funding source, a specific funding source.
And that's because this work sort of came about a bit ad hoc within recent board meetings.
Well,
Because- or how far does this go back? I can't.
Well, I'd like the opportunity for us to talk about that as staff, because, you know, really the commission is the one that has the authority to create budgets and sign contracts. And they've done that here with Aon, and we're going to piggyback on. And then when it comes to statements of work, which are in effect small change orders within the procured, you know, that's where the manager approves those. We don't, even with boards, authorities, and commissions, those are recommending, actions to the mayor and commissioner or the manager. They don't actually make budgetary decisions. Even constitutional officers don't do that. So I think we need to talk about this before, I'm not sure that it's the board's responsibility to enter into a contract or a scope of work with a consultant. I mean, they can recommend it to somebody that actually has fiscal authority to do so.
Right.
This is pursuant to updating the board about the status. And so we're not asking anything of the board other than.
Yeah, I'm not
this is
asking,
where
I'm
we
just
are.
making the board work.
Then we're gonna have to dig for the money.
Mhm.
It would be up to the manager in his authority to, if there were a source of funding available, to make that decision if he approved of it. And so that's something we need to discuss.
Yeah, and we can certainly discuss that offline. But
And
But
so-
you're asking the board for their support. So are you asking for a
Yeah.
formal recommend?
No,
Okay.
we're
No,
not,
the
sir.
board
I must
has
have
This is a
misheard you.
status. This is a status, and there may have been, if that impression was lent, this is simply pursuant to status of the policy statement and that work. That work is contingent upon funding, and we are working to identify the source of that funding.
And so we're just making sure that the entire board is comfortable with that recommendation still moving forward, knowing the full cost is all it is. That I think that's where we're at. Just if we, so that everybody knows what the full recommendation is and yeah, the cost of it.
yes.
Okay.
And it's an administrative task for us. The board has approved the content of the SOW. And the good news is that the SOW does include not only development of the IPS, but looking at plan modifications and reviewing, the current plan. So the good news is that you're getting a lot for the money with this SOW. And then we will deal administratively with identifying the funding source. That's all.
Well, so we're telling the board this is how much it costs, and they've got a pre-existing recommendation to follow this, but they didn't know the cost, and now you're telling them what the cost is. So,
Well, yeah,
so I do think, so you were asking informally, do I have the support of the board to move forward? I think it's appropriate for you to do a formal, like, okay, now we know it's $20,000, chair, you would say, board, do you recommend that this, is this the recommendation of the board to the manager or the commissioner or whoever to proceed with this? I think that's appropriate.
mhm. Well, the board has already voted on that with the cost included. The
But
board
you're
has already-
updating them today that we just don't know where the funds are.
Well, why don't we find the funds and move on?
Yes, and that's what we will do administratively.
Okay.
That's the update.
Okay.
That's all there
Let's
is.
move on.
We will find the funds. I just
All
want
right.
the board to be aware that we are entering into this SOW. And it is, assumed that this will come out of HR's budget. If and I'm just saying that administratively, that will have to be dealt with.
Do we have a targeted deadline to have those pieces in place in order to take the SOW for signature internally?
Yeah, the signature process doesn't take long at all. And the work is to be done by March. So that's the timeline.
Right, but I'm saying it work can't start until we sign and et cetera, et cetera. So do we have a date that we want to present this for signature out so that there's some urgency around finding the funds and getting it signed by the mayor?
The signature process takes about 2 weeks. So that's just a matter of filing it with our clerk of court and sending it over to the attorney's office for review. Since we already have a contract with this vendor already in place. This is
Okay,
a
and
change
the,
order.
and to help me understand, the end of March target by Aon is based on a start date of what?
As soon as it's, I guess the latest date on the SOW is October. So if it's signed, just as soon as it's signed. they
So
would
does that
know it.
push, does that push the March date out?
No, not at this time. Based on, not in conversations that I've had with Aon.
Okay.
Sherry, did you have something? Oh,
Well, I just wanted to share very quickly that based on the documents from Aon that I received today, I mean, there are some concerns that we would need to talk to them about in terms of negotiating what that final document would look like. So that might take some additional time. I can't say for sure what that would look like.
When you say final document, statement of work or the contract or both?
Sorry. Primarily the contract language. I don't necessarily know that I have any concerns about the scope of services, like what they'll actually be performing, but I do have concerns about some of the contract language.
All right.
okay. Well, it sounds like at this point the board has done what it needs to do for this, and so at this point it's going to be turned over administratively to the manager's office and the attorney's office to do some work there, and we'll look forward to that next report back.
Yeah, Tim, I have one other question on that. It might be,
Yeah.
Laura, within that statement of work, is there a time set of deliverables we can manage Aon against to make sure they get to the finish line at the end of March? How is that going to happen internally to make sure these guys don't set it and forget it?
Sir, we work with Aon on a regular basis and we'll establish all that and inform the board
All
accordingly.
right. Do you understand why I'm asking?
Oh, yeah. And if we need to as a board, we could certainly have a special called between now and the end of March to make sure that they are on track with that.
All right. Good. Well, we got everything moving forward there, and we'll just hope it all gets lined up in time so we can meet that March date. All right, moving on in the agenda. The next thing we had here was we had the presentation last meeting on the focus groups that Aon did. And so just some room for a further discussion on those results. Was there anything specific there, Laura, or?
No, I just wanted, before we move away from that, and Aon did a lot of research for us. And what we talked about was basically doing a review of our retirement plan offerings over the course of this fiscal year in preparation for if there were going to be any modifications, that those would be part of the I would say FY 24 budget process at this point. And I think that the board, in having done all of that work, it was just, as board secretary, I wasn't sure where the board wanted staff to go with that. If, if, if the board wanted us to pursue any work, or fact finding or presentations to the board about where the board might want to go with regard to deferred comp and retirement offerings.
Okay. Was there any, did anybody have any specific ideas on that? No. And that, Laura, that would be separate from the, yeah, some of the default enrollment ideas that we were going to be discussing next, right? So, okay. Well, if there's no discussion on that, I guess we can move on to that next item then. On for the default enrollment investment choices, in which I know Dennis had done some research, and that was, I think, included also in the items that were sent out yesterday.
And Tim, to my memory from last conversation, and I think rightfully so, the discussion from the group said to move that decision into part of the investment policy deliverable, if memory serves me right.
I do think that's where most of the conversation was going. Yeah.
Okay. And so is that, Laura, part of that SOW?
The default enrollment.
Yes.
It would be, certainly that would be a plan modification where they might, Aon can look at where we are placing default, where we're placing, enrollees, on a default basis, and then they could certainly make a suggestion as to how we might make that more, not such a low, rate of return and spur people to take action. I think that would be part of that modification review.
Okay.
Okay. Well, how's everyone feels comfortable with having that included in the SOW that we've already approved here, and having that move forward with that work that we'll get back results after March?
Can I just clarify real quick? So what you're saying is based on the document that went out and the work that was put together on what, where employees are in terms of default enrollment versus who's transferred over, we're going to use that to request that Aon provide a recommendation to us of how to make certain corrections to that or adjustments. And to what end are we doing that? What's our goal with it? Is to get more people off default enrollment after a certain period of time, or change how they start?
I think the answer is to change the default enrollment to something that has a better rate of return out of the box, particularly since a significant portion, and I don't have the percentages in front of me, but the data is there. A significant portion of the total enrollees, I think it's 25%, are in the fixed account by default and have never moved. So assuming those parameters stay the same and 25% of enrollees never move from the initial enrollment, it would be nice to move from 3% net 2.6 to something that has a better rate of return and adjusts as they move forward with their career.
Right. And I agree. I think that's absolutely what we want to do, is find a better rate of return. But we're just asking for them to tell us, hey, here's some suggestions as to how we can do that. Is that all we're looking to do? Okay.
Right. And what we had talked about, and hopefully we'll see as one of the suggestions, would be age targeted funds as a default.
And that's good to know. As we work with Aon, we will certainly give that direction.
Okay.
And if we need to put that in the SOW expressly, we can do that too, Sherry, as we finalize that SOW.
Yeah. I would think that makes sense, only given that that's our starting relationship from a fiduciary standpoint with all our employee enrollees, and putting our best foot forward. We want to ensure that we've taken our best shot at that.
If I may interject, this is Tracy. As I don't know if we need to make this specific in the SOW as part of this language, but I think we need Aon to also look into, if we are looking at options that are going to make this a more, again, profitable option for people who just go with the default to have an opportunity to earn more, there needs to be also some kind of safety net, so that those who are defaulted into the plan and then within 30 or 60 days realize, no, that's not what I want to do, and want to back out of that they haven't lost anything if during that time there's actually been a decrease in the market. so that they don't risk a loss. I'm not sure how that would play out, but I think that's something for us to consider.
Yeah, and Tracy, one of the things that I did was take that scenario into account.
Okay.
In an environment in which, for example, in the default and or the return environment, there was a 10% loss of principal on day 90 of the opt-out. We've got about 8.5% that opt out within the first 90 days. And based on a $45,000 salary and a 6% match, the total loss would be at a 10% loss over 90 days, about $67. So economically, it's not a huge dollar amount relative to, and there's not a large portion of the portion, less than 10%, 8.5% opting out. So that makes all the sense in the world. But the question with to talk about is, are we managing the exception to the rule
Right.
to the detriment of the vast majority of the population?
No, fair point.
Does it seem reasonable to look more toward providing more clarity for the individuals, or finding, I don't know what's explained to them now when they enroll initially, but providing them more clarity as to what the options are, what they mean, and what, potential implications are if you do opt out within 90 days and you take a loss, or just giving them more information so they're just making a more informed decision? Is that a reasonable thing to look toward?
Yes, and to that point, now I can only speak pre-COVID when we were still having in-person new hire orientation. We did spend a significant portion of new hire orientation on this very topic. David Michaud with VALIC comes in and does probably a 15-minute presentation where he goes into great detail about how the funds work, what the options are. He gives everyone an opportunity at that moment to go ahead and sign up for a time for him to contact them, to sit down and meet with them personally. So that is done rather heavily during new hire orientation. Now, since we've gone more virtual, that information is still provided in the presentation, assuming they watch the whole presentation. I do believe David does try to reach out to each of our employees as a new hire, but it's just a matter of, if they follow up and take action.
Yeah, and Tracy, my last conversation with Carrie Jenkins over at AIG said that David was significantly backlogged in specifically that process. So
Right.
had not been in contact with people, and clearly
Right.
COVID had an impact to that. So anybody coming aboard has kind of fallen into that default bucket of fixed account.
Right. And at one point we did have 2 representatives, and now it's just down to David. So I'm sure he's backlogged. But that is a good point as we're moving forward. We do need to beef back up our communications, especially now that we are in a virtual world, and looking at better ways to disseminate that information in a way that people will digest it and then take action.
Yeah, and I would suggest, assuming that the end of March, we get recommendations, they make sense, and we adopt them, that we go back to AIG and look for them to provide a plan to backfill and go back to everybody that's in that fixed default environment, educate them and give them an option. Because it's great moving forward, but it doesn't solve the problem we have today of kind of the asset allocation by employee.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else have any ideas there? It feels like we're getting on the same page with that. All right. Fantastic. Well, we will move along, and to another item that we discussed back in September, where we've had requests from some participants being able to borrow from their retirement account. And so I think mainly, yeah, we didn't have a lot of time to discuss that. So let's see where everybody feels like that, how we feel like we should move forward there, if that's a good thing we should be adopting or not. A little bit of discussion.
Laura, did you get additional information that you had referenced when you sent the the notes out yesterday from AIG?
No, I didn't, and we had lunch with them yesterday, and they, have had a change. We used to have Carrie Jenkins as one of our
Right.
account managers. She has transitioned to another role within the company, and they were very apologetic, but they did not get me the information that I requested. So I will stay on them about that and get that to the board as soon as I receive it. All we've had at our board meetings is some input from one employee, Eric Erickson, which you saw in the minutes, and then we've had some board discussion on that. So what we'll do, I guess, is work with AIG to get that information, get it disseminated to the board. And then if we need to have a special called meeting, if there's any required board action, we can do that after Christmas.
Okay, yeah, because no, we don't have to make any decision here today for this, so.
But I guess, in putting this on the agenda, I was just seeking, board direction on, pursuing that further based on our previous discussions. We can certainly do that with AIG.
Does everybody feel comfortable pursuing that further?
Yes.
And Laura, the data that AIG was going to share was on such categories as repayment, percentages of people that take. In other words, so we've got some quantifiable data to look at as opposed to an emotional approach, right?
Correct. We were going to look at their client base and the default rates of their client base. And she had communicated to me that that would take some time, to compile. And so I will follow up with them and stay on them to hopefully get that to us. And then you guys can have some concrete information about the risk that individuals take on when we offer that as an enhancement.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I'll have that ready hopefully for the February meeting.
All right, sounds like everybody's good on that. Well, that reaches us down to the last item on our agenda. Is there any other comments or issues that folks feel like we need to be discussing or have kind of missed through this, especially as we have kind of a lot of pieces in the air now coming up with the SOW and such?
I just wanted to make one point, with Aon looking at the focus groups originally, and then transitioning with this investment policy statement. Are we going to have them look at just the structure of the defined benefits program as it is now? Not talking about the different investments. I'm talking about what we provide to the employees, the match. When, is there a possibility of looking at a person that gets vested after 10 years that we provided, another percentage, for instance? This is just an example, but have them look at the structure of our defined benefit, because there are some people that are not in the pension plan. They're just in the defined benefit as it's their retirement. And, that retirement is sitting, it's holding steady at a percentage for the entire time that person is employed by Athens-Clarke County. And just looking at whether or not it's giving a reasonable retirement, just like the pension has been enhanced over time, and whether or not it's something we can look at to see if we can tweak it or make it better for the employees.
John, I can speak to that, and the answer is yes. That is part and parcel of the ongoing work that Aon is doing in different phases. They began with an experience study of our pension to see what the rates of retirement were, or what we were experiencing as a plan, and updating our assumptions. They moved into the survey and focus group work in order to try to get a sense of what was important to our employees, with the express purpose of looking at the entire program independently and in combination, the DB and the DC side. One of the other pieces that they completed was a sort of I'm not sure if I have the right terminology, but basically an adequacy plan to look at what, if any, shortfall might an employee experience based on current, demographics and choices that we have in place. And so we have all that information, and Aon is moving into a phase where they're going to come to us with some ideas and recommendations on, I guess, for lack of a better word, sort of a 2.0 look at what the retirement offerings are for people going forward. And that could look at maybe different match options, different vesting options, things of that nature that might speak to the current workforce more than maybe our program does, considering turnover trends and all of that. Um, I want to be really careful about how we talk about this because, there's a certain level of defined benefit that people have vested in and that we expect to continue on. Any changes around that piece would be sort of a line in the sand forward. There might be some opportunities for people to take advantage of maybe a different DC offering going forward. But, all of that is coming to give the organization an opportunity to sort of say, what if anything, do we need to change and enhance in the retirement arena? So that's all work that's ongoing.
Okay, well, it sounds good. I mean, if it's part of where the board can have their,
We will bring that to you certainly when those options are available, and there's a need to update the board and get feedback. Certainly that's part of the function of the board, but yeah, we'll keep you to date. Sure.
okay.
And Jeff, with following up on those questions, I mean, so where would that be kind of coming up after the March when we get some of that scope of work within, or you think that would be later on down the line that we'd be talking about some of those large
I think it's
pieces?
probably further down the line. As my recollection is it's maybe more like fall towards an FY23 look at those things as far as implementation of any changes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big heavy lift because anything you decide to do, you have to be able to, it has to be sustainable and you have to be able to meet the obligations you already have. And so,
Well, I guess we've got a pattern, right? I mean, we've done it for the pension over the last decade, so we know the time frame it takes to change something and what it takes to do that. So we should be able to use that as a, an example. Don't you
Okay.
agree?
are you asking me?
Is that for me or Jeff?
Jeff.
Yeah.
We've got a project timeline in place and we're working it. So.
Okay.
Jeff, maybe for just for clarity for all the members maybe at that February meeting, if we could have a little bit of a just a generalized structure of that timeline, so everybody
I'll
can
send
have
it
in their
out to
mind.
y'all today.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah. All right. Any other items that anybody wants to see discussed this evening? No. All right. Well, this is going to be our. Was there somebody who had something? No. Okay. This is going to be the last meeting of the year. So the next meeting we have is going to be in February. Is that correct, Laura?
That is
Okay.
correct. I can give you an exact date.
Is that the 16th?
It is indeed, yes. February 16th.
All right. Fantastic.
Yep, and now we've got an updated meeting invite, so that WebEx on there link, that will work for all the meetings next year. So if there are any updates or changes to those dates, just accept those and it'll be placed on your calendar with that updated link.
Sounds good. All right.
I would assume that we would continue with WebEx into 2022.
I believe so. I think it's more convenient for everyone. Everyone agree?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. We've entered a new world once again.
Well, and Sherry, you'll have to let us know if the Open Meetings Act goes back to pre-COVID standards, which is we have to meet in person, but it was modified to allow
Yep.
us to
I'll let
do
you know.
this. So,
All right. Well, I'll entertain a motion for us to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from John. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And if I don't see y'all before, fantastic holidays for everyone, and we'll see you in February.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You.